You can see then that how this impacts Descartes, right? Descartes is this thinker who comes up with this Cartesian dualism. For Descartes, there still exists, God, but God is something that we perceive in our minds. God is not something that is interfering in the world. Descartes, therefore, with his Cartesian dualism, divides the world into two spheres. There's the thinking substance, what's going on in our mind, and there's extended substance, actual physical things outside of ourselves. And that extended substance we can make sense of, we can know, we can understand, using our minds, using the mathematical language that we are developing. We can understand the world. And so the scientific revolution, therefore, has a big impact on philosophy. Descartes' ideas that the mind can make sense of the world is known as rationalism. And we've already mentioned Bacon and empiricism too, this idea that we can look at, observe things, and therefore by observing things we can establish things that are true. Both of these are clearly influential in how humans perceive the world. Now, another development that comes in... Yes, question?
Is Bacon inductive or deductive?
Bacon is inductive reasoning. And inductive means you start small and then you can build up to these larger statements. And so Bacon is... Empiricism means that truth can be known through your senses, through your observations. And so basically, how do we know what is true? Well, we see that tree, we see that tree, we see that tree, and then from those small observations, we can then assert a truth. And that truth is a theory that holds until we find something that disproves it. And so that's why we have the theory of relativity or the theory of evolution. It's because these are these truths that have come about inductively as a result of the observation that human scientists have made. Okay. So, the impact, one of the interesting impacts of the Enlightenment, this idea that human beings can understand nature, is these philosophers that then apply that understanding of nature back to the human condition. And that's called natural law. Using nature to deduce how human society should operate. Using nature and how nature works to figure out how human society should be structured. So and this is actually a crucial link to the Enlightenment, which we'll talk about in a second, but just to highlight this link. Science is all about how nature is working and operating. The Enlightenment is all about enlightening civilization and creating a better society. Getting rid of, unfair punishment or getting rid of unfair laws. And what's that link? It's these natural law theorists, beginning with Hobbes and then, of course, Locke, that are saying, let's look at nature and let's try to use nature to improve the human condition. So Hobbes looks at nature, and obviously Hobbes is living during the English Civil War, this time of chaos in England. He has to flee. And Hobbes thinks about this, and he thinks, well, just look at this. This is bad. This is not something that is ideal. Humans are violating, this rebellion against the government. This seems to be violating something about, this is not how nature should be. And so Hobbes looks then at human beings and he surmises that man at our core, man in his core, is actually not this great being, right? For Hobbes, man is kind of wicked, selfish, somewhat evil. And so therefore, man in the state of nature, man when left up to his own devices, is incredibly destructive. Violent, steals, pillages, and destroys things. And therefore, man outside of civilization, man in the state of nature, lives a life that is nasty, brutish, and short, according to Hobbes and his Leviathan. So therefore, in the Leviathan, this book, Hobbes argues that way back when human beings came together and they created a social contract. And there's a social contract between the people and the government that they choose, the government that is in charge. The people agree to give up some of their freedom. In exchange, the government provides protection. And for Hobbes, this is an unbreakable social contract. It cannot be broken. What do you mean people give up some of their freedom? Well, you don't have the ability to murder anymore. You don't have the ability to steal. You don't have the ability to pillage. You don't have the ability in American society to drive 100 miles an hour on the freeway. You give up your freedoms to some limit, in some capacity. In exchange, the government provides order. And that order then allows humans to live good lives. And what happens when the government is overthrown for some reason or the government can't provide that order? Man returns to chaos. The Civil War that Hobbes was observing is that example of that chaos. Yes?
Is that the English Civil War?
The English Civil War, exactly, the 1640s. Now Locke, as we've already noted, has a much more optimistic view of humans. And Locke he's sort of a half generation younger than Hobbes, maybe a full generation younger than Hobbes. And he comes about in 1688. He writes, help me out. What is the big political treatise that Locke writes?
I think it's just the second. On government.
Yes, the treatise on
government.
It's a treatise on government.
There's something about
it's something like the second treatise in which he writes about the natural rights and things like that. It is something very straightforward, like treatise on government or treatise on...
Second treatise of government.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. So, Locke writes that this social contract is breakable. And in fact, governments can break it. The social contract is about not just providing order, but protecting natural rights. So Locke looks to nature and he surmises that humans have natural rights. We have the natural right to live, we have the natural right to liberty, and the natural right to property. This is nature. We can deduce this from nature because if we didn't have these things, why can humans think and feel? Why do they want to live? And if they didn't have the right to property, then that would be a recipe for chaos. So from nature, we can deduce that these are rights and that when they're taken away, you're screwing up nature, how things should be. And when the government violates the natural rights of human beings, therefore, the contract can be broken. So the job of the government is to protect the natural rights of people, and the government, when it breaks that contract, can be overthrown.